Okay, are we live now?
Yes.
Okay, I'm like legitimately very excited, and I waited until the last minute before to hop on here because we have possibly the most exciting. I don't want to say it because that would mean other people aren't exciting, but we have Sean M, the one and only Sean M today joining us, which is yeah, no, I'm speechless. So okay, wait, can you? Sorry, I guess we should step back. I'm so.
You should back up then. Like, why is this exciting?
Okay, so some of you may from the blog know Sean M from the comment section. He is the most knowledgeable person on aviation in general, and especially on African aviation, which is like something that most airline executives don't know a lot about at all. So it is very cool that he knows that, and he knows everything else. And the depth of his knowledge on literally everything never ceases to amaze me. Now, of course, he comments on One Mile at a Time, but beyond that, he is like an internet legend in the aviation world. Going back to airliners.net, you had, this is like 20 years ago, you had, what was it, respect rating they had, or what did they, this is literally so long ago.
Dear Lord. Dear Lord, yes.
100, which is like something only one person can have, right? Was it like a...
Yeah, effectively. Although I did serve a 11-year ban at airliners.net before they finally allowed me back into it last year. So I'm a bit of a troublemaker as well in my spare time.
Wait, an 11-year ban? That's like...
Yes. They initially made it a lifetime ban. Then they came back and said, all right, we'll keep it as a 10-year ban, which they extended by a year. And 11 years later, I actually went back to them and said, 11 years are now up. Can I be reinstated? And they were like, yeah, I guess so. And I was reinstated. So there we go.
So Sean is obviously here in a personal capacity. So he's an executive at an African airline, and he's not here in that specific capacity. But can you introduce yourself? I guess explain a little bit about yourself, because I'm just fanboying or fangirling. I don't know if fanboying is a thing. That sounds weird. But it shouldn't. Thing. Boys, okay. I'm just checking. So can you introduce yourself? I'm so excited and I need to stop talking. I'm going to have a drink.
Hi. Hello, I'm Sean. I'm, as Ben says, I run an airline in Africa. For better or worse, I seem to have made a career out of starting airlines in Africa. This is my third. So yeah, from Ghana, Somalia, Uganda, various parts of the world. I've, for better or worse, gotten to know about the dodgiest parts of aviation in the dodgier parts of the world. I'll refrain from some more colorful language which has been used to describe these areas, and happy to take questions, make comments, share anecdotes, and otherwise.
And I would just like to clarify that Sean is from a very legitimate airline. It's cool to see airlines in Africa doing cool things. He's not from Global Ghana Airlines or from Gold Star or from Baltia. That's not Africa, but whatever. Or
right,
from.
But I think it's important to say, like, Africa does not have the monopoly on dodgy fake airlines. Right.
To clarify,
that's important
actually,
to say. We have some homegrown ones here in America as well.
Like Global Ghana, which happens to be a con scheme being run out of Chicago. Nothing to do with Africa, just to
right.
clarify on that.
Yes, I think it's very important to clarify that so that people don't get the wrong impression.
The real question is, why have they not applied for CARES Act funding as part of the bailout? I mean, they were getting ready to start operations. They were just going to hire high-altitude flight attendants. They were so close.
Right. Who could be more impacted by travel, really?
I mean, okay, so stepping back for a second, you live in Ghana, right?
Yes.
And you are from originally, you've lived everywhere, sort of, but
originally born in India, grew up in India, England, and Australia, went to college in the US and then Canada, then was in Ghana, then Somalia, then the UAE, then Uganda, Malawi, and now back in Ghana.
All over the place.
Okay, so first of all, sorry, I would like to just point out I'm not having tonight, since this is a happy hour thing, I'm not having a White Claw for once, which I'm very proud of. Tiffany, look how pretty.
Oh, I love it.
We finally ordered martini glasses because, usually we would go out to drink. I mean, not go out to drink, but, you have a drink at dinner. Like, I would never make a drink at home, but this, of course, has changed. So we finally ordered these. They're not great, whatever. That's not, so can anyone guess what?
But they're sort of fun. And they don't fall over.
And look at the beautiful ice cube. It's the most, shit.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay, so rule number 1 of cocktails, keep your
I'll be right
fingers
back.
out of the glass.
Sorry. 1 second. Ow. Shit.
Like I was saying, Sean, low
Yes.
rent production here.
It's all good.
Yeah.
Believe me, I've done some TV interviews in the last couple of weeks, which have been a little less organized than this, so you're doing well.
Whew. And I don't know. The worst part of this is I'm using up precious paper towels to clean up this mess. So it's like double whammy.
Yeah, that could be a whole separate tangent. Like, we are the only ones not facing a paper towel shortage because paper towels are not something that's ever made it into my kitchen. But I feel for you. I'm sorry.
Well, and
Thoughts and prayers.
Okay, wait, did that? Okay, we're good.
So,
I'm
well,
sorry.
then, while you're doing that, while you're providing housekeeping services, Sean, somebody had a question, which this isn't specifically related necessarily to an airline in particular, but looking more globally, what do you expect in terms of business class service or quality with all these restrictions to come, and like the concerns that people have about distancing and interacting with flight attendants and
I think that's something which is very near to my heart because I spent a big portion of the last week or so working with the authorities here in terms of setting up the appropriate protocols that we're going to need to put in place when we restart our domestic operations here. And I think the general consensus that's come out is we're never going to be able to put ourselves in a situation where we are perfectly safe. And to be fair, aviation is not perfectly safe anyway. Aviation has gotten where it is because aviation through the years has been able to mitigate risk best. And I think that's just something which we've taken from, from the flying aspect of things, from the maintenance aspects of things, into now bringing it into the health aspects of things. One of the statements that we put out at the beginning of this whole coronavirus, so that was just 2 months ago, but it seems a lifetime ago, was that you're actually breathing better air on board an aircraft than you are pretty much anywhere else you are in town. And that is especially true in an urban environment where the air tends to be full of pollutants and there are a lot of people in close proximity. Air on an aircraft tends to be recirculated through HEPA filters or other filters, tends to be heated when it's recycled, coming through the air conditioning packs and so forth. So I don't think air quality and filtration and things on board an aircraft is going to be an issue. In terms of proximity, certainly that is something which has become a concern lately. It's something that we're never going to be able to get away. I think Ben aptly put in one of his articles that you're never really going to be able to have people 6 feet apart in a metal tube flying through the sky. But what you need to be able to do, though, is mitigate that. And that means if you are putting people close to each other, you need to be able to ensure that the environment they're in is as sterile as possible. That means enhanced cleaning protocols, more regular cleaning protocols. High-risk surfaces need to be minimized, or if they are available, I mean, things like sidewalls and windows, which are usually plastics and composites, tend to have a longer hold time for viruses and things. So those need to be cleaned more often. People wearing face coverings, I think, is going to become critical. Avoidance of cross-contamination. For example, one of the areas we've been focusing on in the last week or so has been passenger documents. When a passenger hands over a driving license or a passport to a check-in agent, and the check-in agent handles it, hands over a boarding pass, hands the document back, and then handles another passenger, what are the cross-contamination risks there?
That's
what
a really
protocols
good concern,
do we need
because I have seen so many people like hold their passport like in their mouth while they're like rummaging to get their ticket, and then they hand it to the agent and everyone just rolls with that. I feel like probably people are not going to roll with that going forward.
I would hope not. And in fact, one of the protocols which has been put forward and which we'd implemented in a small way, but now is actually going more forward protocol, is our staff are, number one, not going to be permitted to wear gloves when dealing with passenger documents, for the reason that gloves actually become a carrier for cross-contamination in these circumstances. Instead, they need to sanitize their hands with 70% alcohol sanitizer between each passenger. So, as I said, there's a long thing. I sent Ben a list of some of the things that we discussed. They've been further refined since then, and we're hoping that we'll be putting them into play effective Monday and to get some planes in the sky. And it's something that I've been sitting on an IATA webinar on this, and a whole bunch of things where we're one of the first countries in the world which is going to be going from a lockdown situation to sort of back into more controlled I mean, officially there will be no restrictions other than social distancing recommendations, but to try and get things, the first steps back to normal, and together with enhanced testing regime and everything else. I started coming into this wearing a face mask, but I think we concluded that the sound wasn't very good when I put this on, so we're going to skip that for the rest of the call here. So I think that we're going to see changes, but I think those changes we will adapt to them. I don't think we're going to be in a situation where the airline industry people are not going to fly. I think people in due course will realize that, look, there's risk everywhere in life, and the middle seat of an aircraft, while it's something that I personally will try to avoid by any means, it's not going to have anything to do with coronavirus. It's to do with the fact that I'm fat and have long legs, and that's a really uncomfortable place to put me.
That's convenient, by the way. Your airline has no middle seat, so, you know.
Yes, and that is something we are using very much to our marketing advantage. Social distancing from us means losing a lot less seats than many other airlines have to, so not a problem for us. We're very pleased, and so is Embraer, about finally having something nice to be able to say about the 145s.
So I have a question sort of along these lines, but it's something that you called us out on in a nice way back in the end of February, when I feel like no one was talking about this really spreading and becoming a pandemic. And I did a post at the time, and people were a little, it was too early for people to really get it. But one of the things that you pointed out was that, like we're seeing in Asia, where places like Taiwan and Hong Kong are really handling a lot of the response well, because they've dealt with SARS. So they've sort of like, okay, we know what we need to do in terms of testing and tracing and isolating. Africa, like, you've dealt with Ebola, like you've dealt with epidemics before. So a pandemic is different in terms of scale, but also not really. So does that impact how you're able to respond? Do you think you guys are able to respond more quickly, maybe, than like the US airlines?
I wouldn't necessarily say it's a thing necessarily being able to respond more quickly. I think it's just been an issue that when we do our emergency planning, which every airline worth its salt is doing, I hope, pandemics and health emergencies are part of the playbook. And just as an example, in this country, 2 years ago, every 2 years, ICAO requires that a country has to conduct a full-scale emergency exercise. So usually this will be, you see it from time to time, like, an airport has the people walking around with blood painted on their face, and they ask for volunteers and things. But the most recent one we did in 2018 was actually a health emergency with a simulated inbound flight which had a contagious passenger for a pandemic. And we donated the aircraft and crew for that. So we actually had an aircraft come in there, and there was a passenger pretending to show symptoms, and we had to run through the full quarantine procedures with port health and so forth. And this is something that's actually heavy in our rotation for planning because of the lessons of Ebola and everything else since then. So I think I wouldn't necessarily say we're better prepared. I think we may have had a jump start because it's something that is a reality to us. Certainly, things like terrorist scares and stuff, which other countries may have as more of a reality, are less of a priority to us because of the environment we're living in, while things like health scares are a bigger issue. And I mean, just as a basic example, when of the destinations we fly to, various countries, most of them started bringing in contact tracing forms. So where passengers fill out your seat numbers, where numbers you can reach, countries you've traveled to in the last few days, as early as January this year. We had our full 4-level protocol based upon CAAC's guidance, because they were the only ones who had actually put out any guidance at that time, back in January. So in January, we actually had developed our playbook in terms of when this happens. It wasn't a case of if. It was very much a case of this is going to hit us. The only question is how severely is it going to hit us? So when it happens to this level, we're going to implement level 1, level 2, level 3, and level 4. We're fortunate enough that level 4 at this point has only had to be used for high-risk evacuation flights and repatriation flights. We're in level 2+, which is not quite level 3, but effectively almost everything from level 3 without some of the PPE requirements, which we felt would actually cause more stress on PPE supplies, and more critically also, if we're trying to give the impression that we're working our way back to normalcy, having people wearing, well, spacesuits isn't really going to cut
Yeah.
exactly. So again, it's something which we've looked at with the health services, with the regulators. What are the benefits of this? And the reality is, look, you can wear a spacesuit on an aircraft when dealing with passengers, but the reality is, on your drive to the airport, if you're coming by bus or you're coming by public transport, you're going to be far more exposed anyway. So it's purely theater, and we don't want to start off on the note of getting into theater because it makes it very hard to roll it back once you've actually started it. So we're starting off with what we believe is sensible and what will give the most level of protection. Certainly, when we're going out to fetch people who've been stranded abroad, who haven't been tested, who may have been exposed, yes, we're using the full body PPEs and everything else. And so, I mean, I've got a stack of N95 sitting here for our crew and things, but it's not something that we hope to be able to roll out on a day-to-day basis going forward.
Makes sense.
I have a general question. So, what is the right way to put this? So, in the U.S., people hate airlines. Like, I was thinking about this the other day because, like, for example, there was a funny meme I saw yesterday that's like airlines say, like, we're all in this together. And then it's like, last time my bag weighed 51.5 pounds. We weren't in this all together, right? So, like, it is popular to hate airlines. And actually, at this very moment, I'm realizing, it's easy to pick on airlines during good times. But at this point, I'm like, you know what? Like, the airline business is incredibly complex. There's a reason it's like every business school case study is about airlines because, like, it's such a complex industry. The margins are low to begin with. It is a challenging industry. And, like, as much as these things are funny, like, the truth is airlines, for the most part, do a good job. And there's not a ton of money in it. For the most part, people who do it for passion. So my point is, I want to give airlines a little bit of credit for what they're doing. But my question to you, sorry, that was a really long-winded question. So my point is, airlines, people pick on airlines. I have a question,
which is actually, two questions and more of a comment.
Sorry, I had a drink before I started this, so if it's a little bit long-winded, I'll be honest. Okay, and then I tried. You know what? I would also like to point out, I tried today to mix it up because I've had the same Japan Airlines first-class pajamas on since we started this. I finally found another pair of pajamas, my Air France La Première pajamas. And at this point, it's literally a freaking crop top. So, like, the alcohol and the staying home is not working out. So anyway, back to the question. I apologize. So if I'm not mistaken, in general, or in Ghana or in some other countries in the region, like, people do not fly quite as much annually as people might hear. It's not like Spirit Airlines where you get on an $8 flight to anywhere. My point is, are people more forgiving of airlines because it's not viewed maybe as much as a getting on a bus where everybody just hates life? Or is there an element of like, oh, we respect them, they're doing cool things, they're doing good things?
Okay, it's an interesting question. For starters, I'm going to go into a bit of theory behind the scenes of it. I just give a bit more perspective in terms of the difference between a developing market and a developed market, so to speak, in terms of growth and where the consumers and things are coming from. So I think that may actually explain where the attitudes come to it. In most developed markets, for example, say the US or Europe or so forth, you'll find that at that stage, that air traffic growth and GDP growth, for the most part, the organic growth tends to be mirroring each other. So if the economy is growing at 2%, you'll see air traffic growing at 2%. Certainly, there'll be stimulation in certain areas. You start a new route which is underserved and so forth. You may get people on those routes and the like. The difference is in developing countries. Up to the point where you're hitting per capita GDP of about 1,000, so that's lower middle income countries, you see that once again you're matching this 1-to-1. But when you hit that lower middle income range and that 1,000 to 5,000 per capita GDP more or less, you see that air traffic actually grows at double the rate of GDP growth. And when you think about the reasons for this and behind it, it actually makes a bit of sense because people are having more disposable income. So the first thing that people spend on when they have disposable income is consumer goods. They go out and buy TVs and washing machines and things like that. But the second thing they actually tend to spend on is travel. And when they say travel, it's not necessarily they're spending on vacations, but when you enter that level, you see more entrepreneurship. So you see urbanization. You see people who live in the I would say the villages, but in smaller towns, say in the north of the country, are now coming to the capital city. And those people now need to go back and see their families. They've got life still happening for them. At the same time as people are earning more, you begin to value your time more. If you're making $20 a day, you're valuing your time at $1 an hour, give or take. If you're making $100 a day, you're valuing your time at $4 an hour. Now you're not as willing to spend 16 hours driving to your destination when you can take a 2-hour flight. And as a result, we're beginning to see that in developing markets, the growth in a developed market, the growth comes from natural growth due to economic activity, or growth that comes from stimulation, which means you're doing something new or dynamic for that. In markets, in growing markets, in developing markets, the growth is actually coming from the bottom end of the market, from new consumers. So that is the people who've never flown before, either because they're just the globalized generation. I know the millennial is a bit of a cliche now, but what I call the globalized generation, the generation which has genuinely grown up, not necessarily believing that we've grown up in Africa, therefore we are poor and whatever. They're the generation who's grown up with smartphones, who's grown up with the internet, who's grown up watching the same TV shows in real time as everyone everywhere across the world, and as a result have the same consumer expectations, but none of the preconceptions that I should get 2 pieces of baggage and a hot meal on every flight that their forefathers did. And also those who are recently economically empowered, the ones who previously were traveling by bus, where you don't get 2 pieces of baggage and a hot meal and everything else. So it's a very different product that we have to do. What we actually, when we were setting up this airline 8 years ago, we did some market surveys, and one of the questions was, we gave them different things, safety, reliability, and so forth, and tell us which of these is most important to you, and they could rank them and so forth. And at that time, safety figured 90% plus of people said the number one criterion for choosing an airline is safety. Now, that was extremely high, because around the world, when IATA does these similar kind of surveys, the number comes in at 30%. Today, we brought that number down from 90 to around 40 to 50% over here. And I think that's a huge achievement, because that actually shows the fact that people should take safety for granted. When you are boarding an airline, you should not be saying that airline A is better than airline B because they are safer. I'm less likely to die in a crash if I fly with them. That shouldn't be the case. So we moved on from us. We've got 3 pillars in terms of what we build our product on, which is safety, reliability, and affordability. So safety, number one. Great. I think we have done enough, and I think African airlines in general over the last decade really have done a lot for this. And I was on a panel in Addis Ababa last month with a bunch of airline executives and so forth about African aviation, and this was one of the points that we really hammered through, that today aviation in Africa, with the number of airlines who are becoming IOSA certified, the number of airlines who have actually upped their game so that safety is no longer as much of a concern as it was. You're not, for the most part, there's still some airlines in Africa which are pretty damn scary, and we can discuss TAG Angola. I've got some TAG Angola stories.
Airlines that I may or
yes,
may not
indeed. Yeah. So there's some airlines which are still a bit scary, but for the most part, African airlines today are the equivalent of anywhere of their compatriots anywhere in the world, and I think that is something that has now allowed African airlines to differentiate their product, not necessarily on safety, but on reliability, on affordability, less as much on product. I think in Africa, transport is still viewed as a means to get to your destination, safely, reliably, and affordably, rather than an aspirational product where I'm going to get Krug champagne and caviar and pajamas and everything else.
TAG Angola first class, Sean, I must say to you.
I actually have, and I've got a story on that, but we'll go to that at some other point.
Wait, so you were warning me based on actual knowledge? Who knew?
So backing up a little bit, Sean,
ex-Swiss Air 747-300 back then.
Wow.
Sorry.
No. It's just interesting talking about like the things that go into starting an airline, because I think probably a lot of people watching have like dreamt of starting an airline. So Anthony is asking, since you've done this several times now, how do you go about raising funds for an airline if you're like, I'm going to start an airline in a developing market? Like,
okay. I've done 3 airlines. The first one I was involved with, I was employee number 1 there, but it was a national airline. So it was 100% funded by the government to begin with. And I promise you, if I ever had to do that again, I would rather slice off my nose. Governments have no business running airlines, and having run a government airline, that is something I will tell you from the deepest depths of my heart, I believe to be true now. The second airline I set up was this one, which I then left for 8 years and then came back. But I've set up a cargo airline, but that was a little different as well because it was part of a larger group and we needed to set up an airline within the group for some of our own logistical things. We specialized in conflict zone logistics. So basically, we needed our own airline to be able to do flights into Somalia, Yemen, South Sudan, the conflict zone logistics, as we call it. Other people say shitholes of the world, but same thing. And the second airline, which is the airline I'm back with now, was something which when the national airline was finally shutting down, God rest its soul, one of our directors who was with an investment bank and myself and some of the other managers there, we learned our lessons from the mistakes that those airlines had made. So we basically had the ideas for a strong business plan. We were very fortunate at the time that obviously the investment bank was willing to put up the capital to fund it. It was 2 years, heavy fundraising. We were out with international investors, including at the end, I won't name names, but there was a major Chinese conglomerate which obviously invested heavily in it. There was a sovereign wealth fund which invested in it. There were investment banks that was invested in it, and there was a national pension fund which invested in it. So overall, it was over $50 million of commitments we needed to get, and which we were successfully able to raise. And I think it was a solid business plan, the opportunity, right place, right time. But I think that's true with most business plans. Airlines are no different in that respect. If you've got a solid business plan and you have the ability to pitch it to the right people, I'm fairly confident that it will be recognized by people who know what they're talking about. And at the same time, while these have been 3 successful airlines, I will also say that I've had probably north of 500 business plans cross my desk at various points, and I've always said I'll give you my first opinion for free, and my first opinion for free usually is burn this and don't tell anybody you even thought of it. And believe me, if there has been a bad business plan, I've seen it, and truly, the business plans I've seen make
you
things
should
like
forget airlines and just start doing consulting in
we have to
California.
We have to talk about that very point in a second. So first of all, sorry, for those of you just joining us, since it has been a while, we are joined today by the one and only Sean M., who, in addition to being a frequent and very knowledgeable commenter on 1 Mile at a Time, is an executive at an African airline and is generally the most prolific internet airline forum speaker, person, writer. Okay, so now that very excellent introduction, the best introduction anyone's ever seen, is out of the way. Okay, so can we talk for a second about Global Ghana Airlines? So here's the thing, is, I understand, for example, some airlines, it's a scheme to make money, it's a scheme to do something or another. So, or maybe stepping back for a second, for those who are not familiar with Global Ghana Airlines, first of all, my apologies, you're missing out on the best entertainment there is. But, this was an airline that was going to start nonstop flights between Chicago and Accra, Ghana. And they didn't have a plane. Sean, I'm sorry. You, what the hell are they thinking?
You're doing good.
Well, I mean, so Chicago, Accra, and they didn't have a plane. They claimed that they accidentally hired low-altitude flight attendants rather than high-altitude flight attendants. They even went so far as to sell flights starting in October, a few months out. Again, they had no plane, no operating certificate or anything. They were just going to lease planes. They did have a very nice marketing video though, with a plane that looked like it was out of whatever. So I understand airlines like Baltia where they were trying to raise money or something, but the person behind this was not even trying to raise money. He's like, I will put my own money into it before I put anyone else's. But wait, I don't actually have any money, but I will still sell tickets for a flight that is launching.
My takeaway from Sean's earlier statement was that other people's money is the best way to start an airline, and really the only way to start an airline. That's
the only smart way to start an airline.
But this guy had morals. He didn't want to take other people's money. He wanted to use his own because he believed so much in it. So what was actually going on there? Do you have what is your best guess?
I'll sum this up in one line, which is there are crazy people in this world.
Has anyone heard from Mr. O'Toole recently? Because
Has anyone heard from Mr. O'Toole at all? Because quite honestly, I filed official complaints. Obviously, we had to because this was something that was having a negative impact on us. People were generally sending us stuff on social media. Oh, you're a scam like this and so forth. So we actually filed an official US DOT complaint about it. We filed a complaint with the Ghana Civil Aviation Authorities. We filed. It basically got escalated through diplomatic channels. FBI got involved and stuff like that. And I believe he was told at that point of time that you are violating the law and there will be consequences if you continue to do this. So I think he's gone a bit silent since his last attempt at making a splash, and I'm going to hope that it stays that way.
Right, because you talked to him in like October?
I had a lovely phone call. Very nice guy. I'm still waiting to hear from his lawyer because his lawyer was going to follow up on my blog post and, share his statement. I had followed up several times asking to hear from Mr. O'Toole's lawyer. It never happened. But, I really, the thing is, look, I know I'm completely crazy, but I love startup airlines. Like, there's something so exciting. I'm sure you can appreciate this in a way that, like, about a startup airline where when you've flown a lot of airlines, there's something really exciting about not knowing what to expect and about getting on a plane. Like, I will take for example, a terrible airline with a new business, like Ukraine International Airlines. We did that, Tiffany, from Kiev to New York on a 767. Like, I'll take that over Lufthansa first class with a 4-hour delay.
Would you really?
Well, no, not again. Really? I would have
because we were so cranky by the time we got in the plane because they were doing like psychological torture in the lounge with making every announcement like every half a second. And then they called for the flight. They had us standing in the gate area forever. I'm like, by the time I got in the plane, I was so cranky and you were cranky. You're like, this is terrible. And you had like 6 meals of salmon and no IFE. And all we had was a deck of cards. Because there wasn't even any power. And you were sick.
Amazing. And it was amazing.
Yeah, it's because you were on cold medicine. That's why you thought it was
Tiffany,
amazing.
I better not invite you on board one of our Embraers because you really won't like it. Then.
What is your longest flight, though?
I love Embraers. It's like this, I mean... It was just the combination for this particular situation. Like, I think if we hadn't been so tired, like our flight left from Baku at like 2 a.m. or something like that. And Ben was sick and then we had that terrible layover. So we were just cranky.
But so the point is there's a real joy to trying new airlines. So like in this very twisted way, I almost try to convince myself. I'm like, you know what? Maybe Global Ghana Airlines will actually launch operations on October 31st. They might not have a plane, but there are a lot of dreamers out there and so I was rooting for them is my point because I would have loved to be on that inaugural flight. I don't know what plane, whatever, but it's sad. So Johnny O'Toole, if you can make it happen, do it because I want to be on the inaugural flight. If there's not like a hit put out for me, but
I did buy a ticket on their last inaugural flight, but they never figured out. They never figured out how to charge my credit card, and but I do have the confirmation, which I had to buy the ticket because otherwise I couldn't submit a DOT complaint. So that's the basis on which I filed the DOT complaint. And
I'm sure that was a fun expense report. Like, here's my ticket. No, there's no corresponding
but they
charge
never
on
charged.
the corporate
But they
card.
never charged me. Yeah,
I'm so jealous you were able to at least go through the process. If you had any clue how many times I tried to buy a ticket with him and got an error message, I spoke to Mr. O'Toole himself about my ticket not going through. He accused me. He was like, "Oh, well, I'm doing something wrong." Like, I tried he has every one of my credit card numbers.
To be fair, you're not very good at using the internet. It's not like you're a blogger or a millennial or anyone who would know how to use the internet.
I can find anyone on the damn internet. Okay, I just can't use a damn computer otherwise. But the internet. Okay.
So Mike has a question, Sean, that I am not sure if it's intended to be shady, but I'm going to go ahead and read it as shady because that's more fun. Sorry, Mike. So, Sean, as an airline executive, what do you find interesting about reading 1 mile at a time?
Honest answer, I've been reading Ben's posts on the internet since he was 14 years old or thereabouts. Since 2004. I actually went back after he said, let's do this tonight. I went back through old airliners.net posts.
I've known Sean on the internet for more than half my life. That's scary.
So it's been very much a case of the little annoying Ben back then is now big annoying Ben. And, I enjoy reading it more in terms of what my friend Ben has written, as well as the fact that now Ben is probably one of the more influential people in aviation journalism. And to be honest, it's true, because I regularly get Ben's articles forwarded to me by my board members, like, what are your views on this? And in some cases, it's been something that I've sent to Ben saying, hey, you should do an article about this. I'm like, yes, he does have a good point. So
collusion and scandal.
I love you,
why
Sean.
I've asked him to stop putting HT Sean M when I send it, please.
I have to. I'll probably get in trouble. Well,
yeah, maybe.
I was going to say Sean M is a very good anonymous source on things for whatever it might be. So not everything, obviously. He's not behind, whatever, but he's a good source. He's a good man. And he knows what he's talking about. Wait, so, okay, you have flown TAG Angola as well.
I have.
You've had the pleasure.
Yes. Do you want to hear this story? Because I love telling the story. Okay, it was 2006. We were, first of all, getting...
I love any story to start with. So it was 2006, because clearly it was such a momentous and memorable event that you're like, here's my receipts. Let's start with the receipts.
Sorry, one second. Now I can show off my ice cube without the whole drink, except now part of it is melted. But this...
Does it look like an ice cube? Yeah.
Well, no. It was when it started one of those big...
Yeah.
Did Nick get you a drink? You were just drinking coffee. What the hell?
He did.
Okay, see, so my point is I have the same ice cube, so...
Good job. Don't wash that ice cube tray in the dishwasher.
No. Okay,
I'm sorry.
Sean, you were talking, it's 2006. Let's step back.
Yes.
Throw back to
Angola. Okay. First of all, back then, getting an Angola visa, now it's got e-visas and everything, but back then, getting an Angolan visa was a fairly large production. We were supposed to go to Angola for bilateral air service negotiations with the Angolan government. So was representing governments and so forth. So I had a diplomatic note, but the only place they could process it was at the Angolan embassy in Pretoria, and it took them 3 days to do it. So I had to go to South Africa.
Wait,
3 days.
Pause for a second. Where the hell else do you get a story like this? I'm sorry. The year was 2006. We were there. Come on. This is amazing.
Right.
Continue.
Right. Our diplomatic convoy was going, and we had to first go completely out of the way to the literal other end of the continent in order to get our visas processed. But, no matter. This is just a day in the life.
Indeed. So I got my Angolan visa, which was in Portuguese, obviously. And then to get into Angola, I had to figure out a way to get in there. So fortunately, my friends at Air Namibia got me a zero fare ticket. So I flew from Johannesburg to Windhoek to Luanda on an ancient wet leased 737-200, and it was one of those flights where my actual thought on between Windhoek and Luanda was there's 33 people on board, and it was if this plane were to crash, you'll see a footnote saying the dead included 1 Indian, 3 Canadians, and so forth. This is one of those plane crashes in Angola, the flight between Windhoek and Luanda sort of thing. But we landed okay in Luanda. There was some issue with the visa, I think, because it was a diplomatic visa, which I didn't know because I didn't speak Portuguese, and there were obviously some comments there which hadn't translated appropriately, and I went and stood in the wrong line, and then because I was going for a different government than my passport nationality, I was pulled aside, and a guy from the embassy came and fished me out. So first of all, welcome to Luanda was a bit dodgy, and Luanda in 2006
right,
was
you were the worst secret agent ever. You were showing up with the wrong visa, in the wrong line, with the wrong passport. Did you not go to spy school? This is not how it's supposed to work.
Oh, you don't even want to know my Saudi visa, because that was also written in Arabic, and that was a whole other story with the similar situation. But anyway, let's go to the Angolans. So we had our 3 days of completely unproductive meetings in Angola, and I was supposed to be flying back again on Air Namibia, but truly, Luanda in 2006 was one of those cities which I've been to hundreds of cities around the world. I've been to most countries, more than half the countries in Africa. But there's one place I never want to go back to again. It's Luanda. It was just one of those cities which I just felt depressed about. And when we were coming to the end of it, nothing was actually happening. I was, okay, I cannot take another day of waiting because Air Namibia flew 3 times a week and TAG flew 3 times a week to Johannesburg. So TAG's commercial director was in the meetings with us, and I'm like, look, please, whatever you do, can you get me a ticket? So he's like, no problem, made some phone calls, et cetera, got me a discounted ticket. So show up there with my staff ticket, all noted in English, paper ticket back then, of course, authorized VIP passenger, issued on authority of commercial director, go up to the check-in counter and hand it over to the guy. And he's like, did you reconfirm this 72 hours prior to departure? I'm like, no, because it was only issued yesterday, which was 24 hours prior to departure.
And also, like, VIP from the commercial director. Look at my, diplomatic visa and my receipts.
So he looks
I
at the
them.
bottom and he's like, no, but it says you must reconfirm 72 hours prior to departure. So I'm like, okay, so what do I need to do? He's like, well, you'll need to pay a $50 penalty.
Of course.
I'm like, no problem. Here's $50. Can I get a receipt? He's like, oh, my receipt book is upstairs. Now, because of the extra security, by the time I go upstairs and come back with the receipt book, the check-in may be closed for your flight. So once again, sir, I ask you, what would you like me to do? I'm like, that's fine. You can deliver the receipt to me at the boarding gate. Yes, sir, that is a good idea. So I get my boarding pass, upper deck of the ex-Swiss Air 747-300.
I'm so jealous. Oh,
no, you're not. You're not. You have no.
Oh, no, I am.
So, ex-Swiss Air 747-300. So we go out there. I think it's something like a 10:30 a.m. flight or something. Then we have to go to the Tag Lounge, which, quite honestly, relative to the rest of the airport, was a true oasis. At the time, consisted of basically, it was a smoking lounge as well. So a smoke-filled room with, I'm convinced a dog had peed on the couch because it smelled that way and it was wet. So I didn't actually sit on it, but that was what the couch sort of felt like. It could have been something else I didn't test. We sat there and it was, I think, as I said, 10:30 or whatever flight, and it was 9:30, 10, 10:30, 11. About 30 minutes after that, we were like, what's happening? And they're like, oh, no problem. We board now. So we sort of went out and they took us out to the plane, and we boarded the plane and we're on the upper deck over there. And now it's 11:30, 12.
This story would not be as good if there weren't an upper deck on this aircraft. I'm just going to say.
No,
that's really
it to the whole. Okay. Because the upper deck rear galley actually was the smoking lounge for the crew while we were waiting for whatever to happen. And that was for the cabin crew. For the pilots, of course, they were in the cockpit smoking. And I swear the flight engineer had tuberculosis because today he would be one of the comorbidities for COVID already. He was just the whole time. So we're there. So I wandered down the steps about 2 hours after departure time. Oh, did I mention I had the Director General of the Civil Aviation Authority in the seat next to me? So that's also interesting.
As one does.
As one does. So wander down the steps, and I'm like, what's happening? And he's like, we are waiting for...
Pause. I would just like to point out the comment from Steve, LMFAO, this story is everything we hope for and more, and it's not even over.
Yeah. The good part's still coming. So I have video of some of this too, so I can even send this to Ben at some point.
2000 video is what everyone on the internet is looking for.
Absolutely. High quality. So we went down the stairs and I'm like, what's happening? Because we had some people who actually had flights to connect to in Joburg. So he's like, we are waiting for some passengers. We're waiting for some passengers. So, but hanging down by the steps at door 2 left on 747, and then a all-white 737 pulls up 200 next to us, literally pulls up, opens the door, and the inbuilt air stairs drop down, and like 6 big South African dudes carrying tote bags that either contained AK-47s or some sort of mining equipment, definitely not clothes judging from the weight. And they walk upstairs, literally, they walk into the plane and they are saluted and led to the first 4 rows of the cabin. And then I'm told, okay, now we go. And they close the door and I walk up the steps and we start taxiing. Now, during this time, there's no safety video or anything which has happened. We start bumping our way to the runway, and the safety video starts. Now, the safety video is the Swiss Air. Oh, that was...
Were there pre-departure drinks?
There was warm orange juice available on request. You had to go to the smoking area in the galley, and they sort of like poured it from you into a plastic cup. So we bumped our way out there, and just as we're coming up to the runway, someone realizes it's time to play the Swiss Air safety video. So we get it in in English, Italian, French, German, Romansh, and whatever other Swiss languages. It's the Swiss air safety video, which we get. We turn onto the runway, and I expect maybe we're still taxiing, going to the other runway or something. But with the Swiss air safety video playing, I hear the engines spooling up. And of course, the cockpit door is still wide open. The guy, I think flight engineer probably still had a cigarette, like half smoked or whatever. And he was there, he's pushing his throttles up. So we're like, all right, it's time to go. Seatbelt sign's not on, nothing's on. We're just like, okay, let's go. Safety video playing, rumble, 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 rumble. As we're on the takeoff roll, I look at the jumps because I was in the exit row of the upper deck on the 300, so that's in the middle. And I look at the jump seats
next to the head of civil aviation for the country.
Oh, absolutely. And I look at the jump seats in front of. I think he was just sort of in shock at that moment, but yeah. So the jump seats in front of me, none of them are occupied. The crew are all sitting at the back in the last row of the upper deck, smoking and chatting and doing whatever as we're rolling down the runway with the safety video playing and the cockpit door open. We rotate and off we go. And I've got some beautiful. Luanda from the air is actually a beautiful city. It's pretty depressing on the ground, but it's really beautiful from the air. The lovely coastline and so forth. So I got a bunch of pictures of that. And as we're climbing out, etc., the safety video comes to an end. We're still fairly steep climb, and I see one of these crew now sort of making their way up, holding from seat back to seat back, and reaches the jump seat and sits down on the jump seat. So I'm like, wow, they finally decided, they're doing something right. And then to my absolute horror, while we are about 8,000 feet in the air, they lean over and arm the door. First of all, now, the upper deck doors, if you've ever been trained on a 747, the upper deck doors arming is...
It's an important step that maybe you should do on the ground.
At this point, the Director General of Civil Aviation looks at me and he's like, please, when these people come to our country next, tell me in advance. I want to do a ramp check. So they served us breakfast. And the breakfast, I think the choice was, it was very carb heavy. I think it was like a croissant and 3 buns or 2 croissants and 2 buns. There was some sort of...
There's at least a selection.
Yeah, there was option.
That's a premium service.
Absolutely. I think there's always an option because I believe, as they say, choice of meal. Your choice is eat or don't eat. So anyway, we do all this. We start circling over Johannesburg, etc., and we finally land in Joburg about 2.5 hours late. At which point, a lot of people have obviously missed their connections, and a lot of Angolans did not have visas for South Africa. So they are
who would connect anywhere on Tag Angola? Why would you do that to yourself?
Because back in those days, there used to be 1 flight a day from Luanda to Johannesburg. So if you needed to connect to the rest of the world, you had to fly that flight to get to Johannesburg to connect to Australia. Or
reminder for those watching at home, this was 2006.
This is 2006. Not much better today.
Which is after 9/11. Yeah. So you would think that there would maybe be like some closing of doors, possibly.
Yeah. So... we go over there, and so TAG is there, and our ground handlers in Johannesburg at the time were the same as the TAG ground handlers. So I spoke to the guy. I'm like, look, what's happening now, etc. He's like, well, TAG actually owes a lot of money to the airport hotel here, so they're not going to take the passengers who misconnected. So watch and see what they do now. So TAG was, okay, everybody who has visas for Johannesburg are ending up over here, come into this bus. Everybody who doesn't have a visa and we need to arrange something for you, please come into this bus. So everybody who didn't have a visa and had misconnected got into one bus where they closed the door. And the other bus, which us in it, just drove away. And they were like, the people on the bus who don't have visas, get back on the plane. You're taking you back to Luanda. We can't afford to put you in hotels over here. We'll put you back in Luanda and fly you tomorrow. Try again. At that moment in time, I decided that Angola was not on my must-go-back-to list, and TAG is on my, if there is a choice between this plane and a flying cockroach, I'm going to see whether the cockroach has a seatbelt, and that'll still put it 1 step higher. So yeah, that's my TAG Angola story, Ben.
I must second all of the comments that are being left right now, which is I audibly gasped just now. This story is the best part of my week so far.
Mm-hmm.
I said one of our earlier happy hours was my favorite. I lied. It's this one. Okay, now see. So someone asked, Ben, are you still not afraid to fly any airline? Please, I have flown tag and goal. I've had
He has.
13 years later, I had the pleasure, and I mean, I didn't have that. Well, I kind of did have on my second flight that kind of an experience where, first of all, their delay process is not very official, where it's just like, okay, it's 10 p.m. and my flight is supposed to leave at 10:30. Like, should I go to the gate? They're just like, wait. The flight still shows us on time, and you're waiting and waiting and waiting, and you're like, what the hell? Like, when is this flight leaving? They're just like, oh, just, technical fault. It'll be soon. And you're just like, how soon? Also, every time I took a picture, which I can appreciate on one hand, I guess not a lot of people are taking pictures of their beautiful flagship lounge, the TAG Angola first class terminal
Which
Luanda.
sounds like it's improved a lot. TBH.
I mean,
it might get an award even for most improved.
Yeah, I mean, so my TAG Angola experience by comparison, is nothing. I only got threatened by the purser, and the purser was only asleep the whole flight, and he only literally snatched my phone out of my hand. So yeah, it's like same thing.
They are in the doors.
I mean, we didn't have to evacuate, so who knows? I did not have the pleasure of sitting on the upper deck of a 747 where it's obvious. 777, I was not even going to look their way in the galley because they were not having any of. Yes. I was with two other people, and clearly we stood out. So in Lisbon still, the station manager got on the plane, and he's like, you guys look different. Like, why are you on this flight? Not like just out of curiosity. He was very nice. It turns out he used to be the station manager for like British Airways in Tel Aviv or something. So he's super nice. But he's like, they mentioned that you guys are like kind of weird. Like, what is going on?
Right. But he has he's been the station manager in Tel Aviv. So he probably has a higher level of natural skepticism than somebody who's been the station manager in like literally anywhere else. I mean, even the fun started already at Lisbon airport, at flying Lisbon to London, the check-in experience. Like, I wanted to take a picture of the freaking sign at the check-in, like the first class check-in sign. And they have like a security guard who's like, no, you can't take a picture of that. And I was with somebody who was just like, why? And he was like, you can't. And he's like, I would have just let it go. Which, to be clear, that was not me. Like, I am generally the person who's like, why? Like, justify your rule to me. But I would not have.
I've learned you don't argue with airline people. But he just kept pushing. He's like, why?
I actually have a photograph of a security man's 3 of his fingers in front of my lens as I tried to take a picture of a TAG plane in Luanda. So yes, I know
Sean,
exactly what you're talking about.
Get you? Can we do like a TAG Angola, a group trip to, Well, okay, actually, this is okay. Here's my question: what airline do you not feel safe flying other than TAG? And will you fly it with me?
I'm not going to name names right now because today TAG's in a very different situation than it was in 2006. Today, I'd probably be happy to fly TAG. I don't think that's something I should be commenting on right now, especially since my fellow IATA airlines and I sit on safety committees together, not name names. But to be honest, if you think that any airline you've heard of is probably safe enough to fly on. When I talk about planes which are not safe to fly on, I mean, I'll go back to my Somalia days where we had an airline called Central Air. Okay, I'll name this, Central Air of Somalia, an airline I would probably not be safe on flying on. They used to fly, this was in 2013, 2014, a Ilyushin 18. It used to be Nicolae Ceausescu's former presidential plane, which through various things wound up being painted completely blue and based in Mogadishu. And Central Air it didn't actually have seats in it. It was a plane with...
Wait, it didn't have seats? What did you just say?
Correct. It had a cabin. So they used it for freight some days, they used it for passengers some days.
We've seen a lot of that happening lately. Like Air Canada took all their seats out so they could do more cargo, and then still couldn't get PPE from China.
Correct.
So it's
correct. So
Central
Air was the leader in that. The difference being Central Air, when they decided to put passengers, didn't actually bother reinstalling the seats. They actually had folding lawn chairs, which they kept like a stack of them by the ladder. I'm not even saying the jetway or the steps, by the ladder. And you walked up and you picked up your folding lawn chair and you got on board.
And then you bolt them
It's like the bring your own
lunch on board,
like American and Delta used to have. Yeah. Oh my God.
Because see, the Ilyushin 18, the way, if you've ever watched an Ilyushin 18, it doesn't actually have a high angle of attack. So it just sort of lifts itself up and down. So they don't really slide around much on board the aircraft, and they don't slide much at all when you're sitting on them. So it was very much a case of let's fill it until it fills in. And if we've got some space at the back, you can throw in a few goats. And off they went. And my favorite one was one day when they were flying to Kismayo, which is in southern Somalia. And they did the morning flight to Kismayo and then an afternoon somewhere else, I don't remember where. But when they went to Kismayo, and while they were on their way back, there were all sorts of news reports and radio station that a plane was shot when it was flying into Kismayo. And we were like, well, the only flight we know that's going to Kismayo today was Central Air. So what happened to it? And then it comes in. We called it the Blue Goose. It was basically this big blue thing. And
of course, what else would you call it?
It looked fine. It was smoking out of one engine, but that was normal. And it landed and it came. And so I went up there, and the captain didn't speak particularly good English, but one of the guys, I think he was a navigator, did. And I was like, look, we had this report of this. Have you been shot and everything? And he's like, no, we're not being shot. No problem. But wait, I check. And Igor, come check, etc. And they start doing a walk around. And then Igor at the back is like, hey. And he's pointing out, and he's got 3 bullet holes, like right at the rear fuselage on it. And they're like, yes, we be shot. And captain's like, this big problem. So they canceled the afternoon flight. They spent the afternoon just sort of patching things up. And the next morning, they were back up to Kismayo again. So yeah, that's an airline I'd be scared on flying with.
Andrew, you should paste in the link to that post you did on like your airplane isn't repaired with duct tape, because I feel like that's an appropriate thing for people to read at this moment. Oh yeah, we were shot, but it was so like inconsequential that we didn't bother to
most important
put it in the log. We didn't need to divert.
Were there first and business class lawn chairs, or were they all one cabin?
Oh, that's an excellent question.
It was just one cabin. It was one cabin. Yes, it was just it was a combi aircraft, so the actual configuration was very well on the day.
Wait, it was an official combi or just like a combi by accident?
Oh, when it comes to the official thing, it was registered in Kyrgyzstan.
Also, Tiffany's literally crying. This is amazing.
There's actually more to that story about the Kyrgyz registry, because when Somalia CA and Kyrgyz CA got together to find out whether this was a legitimate registry and things like that, there's a lot more to that story. And anyway, we'll go into that some other time. So the Somalia story is a lot better than any of this. We haven't even started the Somalia part.
I think I speak on behalf of literally everyone when I say you need to join us again, please, sometime soon, because this is, this is Jesus. This puts everything else into, I don't know if into perspective is the right word, but it's something.
I think Euro sums this up. Like, I knew that Soviet planes were built to be more durable, but damn, just.
I'm speechless. I have nothing to say. Yeah, where do you go from there?
I'm sure there's questions. I don't have my YouTube open. I'm sure you've got questions.
How do you go from those? How do you go from lawn chairs on planes and
right.
arming doors?
Lawn chairs and bullet holes and like how do we fill the next 3 minutes?
You need to come back, please. Yes,
Isn't there a question about the Chase Sapphire Reserve or something?
Oh, there are questions, but how the hell do you ask?
There are questions, but like, yes, like people are like,
what if
what's
my
going to happen to my
strategy?
business class service? Like, go back and tell more about the co-pilot who's like, oh yeah, looks like there are bullet holes in the fuselage. It's just, it's a day ending in Y. These things happen.
It would be downright insensitive to your stories to follow this up with just, answering any random questions, because this is next level. This is, okay. Well, actually, so I want to visit Ghana. I would ideally like to, in one direction, fly Gold Star. I realize I've been waiting for that. I realize I might be waiting a minute or two. Where should I stay?
Well, the good places in Ghana, if you're looking to spend points, there is a Marriott, which is actually a very nice Marriott, which coincidentally happens to be...
Does it have a club lounge? Because that's what Ben is looking for in his international hotel experience.
I'm sure it does. It's a brand new property. It opened up in 2018, so it's top of the line. It's got all the U.S. government contracts. You wander through the lobby and you see half the people there are U.S. military and stuff like that, contractors in the region. So
Everyone on TBY.
It's looking, yeah. If you're looking for something more luxurious, there's the Kempinski Gold Coast, which is where the one U.S. airline flying to Ghana keeps their crew. Again, that's a 5-star Kempinski property. There's the Movenpick Ambassador, which is another 5-star, which is where a couple of other major airlines keep their crews. There's the Holiday Inn Airport, which holds the distinction of having a presidential suite that was actually occupied by U.S. president, because Obama stayed at the Holiday Inn's presidential suite when he visited Ghana. So there's that as an option.
Why did he stay at an airport presidential suite?
Because at the time, that was the most secure area.
Yeah.
They actually secured the entire block, kick everybody else out of the hotel, shut down all the offices in that block, and secured the block rather than take him all the way into town. So they just kept the airport as a secure green zone to keep him in from. When Bush came to Ghana, W came to Ghana, he stayed at the ambassador's residence. But during his stay, they shut down cell service throughout the country and everything else so that nobody could call each other and say he's passing this location and that location. So it was fairly interesting.
Okay, wait, actually a couple of very quick fire questions here, or whatever the term is. Okay, what's your favorite aircraft type? Just to fly as a passenger. If you could fly any plane.
As a passenger?
Yes.
747-400.
Obviously.
Nah.
740. Okay.
I love the Embraer, but it's not the most comfortable as a passenger. 747 of any type is the queen. It is where I spent my first million miles on a single aircraft type. Was pretty much close to what a 747. 747s are.
Okay. Well, the question more specifically actually was, which it does not answer, is favorite aircraft type that was started to be manufactured after I was born. So
post 1990.
Not a 747.
Okay, post 1990, I've become extremely partial to the Airbus 350. I find it to be an exceptional aircraft, exceptionally comfortable. I've flown it with Qatar. I think I've flown almost all of Ethiopian's ones now because that's what they fly to Accra. So every time I'm going anywhere, I tend to be on that one. And I just love that aircraft. I think it's a wonderful aircraft. And I think it may not be a game changer from a business perspective, but from a passenger comfort perspective, you actually feel the XWB both in economy and in business.
And your favorite airline experience you've had as a passenger, premium cabin experience, whatever, in a non, official capacity?
I am going to go with Gulf Air in 2005 when they had their $48 Bombay to London to Manila to Abu Dhabi fares in first class, and that was on
very
the
direct routing.
Whoa! What?
Yeah, Bahrain in every segment.
Via Muscat back then. It was actually interesting because the way the fare was filed, it allowed multiple transfers en route. So you could it was basically a Bombay to Abu Dhabi fare, which you did it was a Bombay to Bahrain fare, which you did Bombay, Muscat, Abu Dhabi, Manila, Bahrain, and you just got it as a Bombay to fare. So I only did the Bombay to London and I threw away the rest of it, but I know people who flew that entire thing back and forth.
Do you not know throwaway ticketing is a very bad thing to do?
I think that buying a $48 fare in first class halfway around the world is also a very bad thing to do. So let's not start going into ethics of things right now. To be fair, I actually did ask Gulf Air, is there a problem with this ticket? And they're like, no problem. You buy it, you fly it, no problem.
Wait, what plane was this?
It was A330s with the flatbeds and the onboard chefs and everything.
Wait, so they had first on their A330s?
Oh, yeah.
Because now they have business on them. It's 222 on the 330.
Okay, 2005 then. Come on.
So what was it a 121 or 222? Was it like Cathy's old A340-600?
121.
It was what? 121?
121.
Was it?
I'll send you pictures.
Okay, I'm actually curious because I'm so sad. Okay, I'm so sad when I look back at these products and I'm like, I never had the chance. But I mean,
I'm pretty sure it was 121. Yeah.
It's kind of why I like. I love Oman Air's old business class just because it's such a throwback. It feels like it's such a nice product, but it clearly is from a long time ago, which I love.
I'm not a big fan of Oman. I flew Oman in January, and after reading your reviews, I was like, "Oh, that'll be an exciting thing," and it was very meh.
Okay, well, you know what? Okay, we're going to need you back because I want to hear all about that. So we have more than exhausted our time, and I mean, this has been. I speak. I think
we're 4 minutes over, and we've more than exhausted.
Yes, and everybody said, "Wow, this is something." So
this is amazing.
Sean, it is an honor.
Very few people can make me laugh until I cry. That's very high praise. I don't actually know if you've ever seen that before.
That's the first, and I have been messaging with you for many years, so it is cool this is actually my first time ever speaking to Sean, so I hope to have the pleasure again, both here, hopefully you'll join us, and
when you visit Ghana to try Global Ghana, Airpeace, AWA, and all the other airlines. You've been itching to fly in this region.
I will do it before Global Ghana and Airpeace because
you should have done it before South Africa got into the mess they're in, because that would have actually given you a viable itinerary. And with the Lagos airside transit that I offered to arrange for you, you can imagine the Lagos transit. You could have done a video live.
I generally don't want to go on your crazy aircraft adventures, but I would go on that. That sounds fun.
We sort you out.
Sean, thank you. This has been very, very fun, and it is very late for you. Late for me, and you're technically on the other side of the ocean, but apparently only 4 hours ahead. But thank you for joining us. This has been too fun, and I'll message you and ask if you'll join us again, but you better.
This has been the best hour of my day. That's so nice.
Thank you to everybody also who tuned in and joined us. This flew by. Now I'm going to be, you need you work in the industry. I was going to say, otherwise, if you're looking for, writing gig, that's not exactly what you're going for. Just saying. My point is your stories need to be documented somewhere because this is next level.
I've got, for those actually who want to spend $1 on Amazon, I've got a book out there.
Yes, plug your book.
Yeah, it's out there. It's about, actually, if you've been on Flyer Talk, you've read most of this from old trip reports, but the book is just a slightly more refined version of it. It's a quick read. It's $1 or something like that. I can't remember the title offhand because it's actually an extract from a TAF, but it's a fairly long, convoluted one. Just Google it. Just sort of like airline. No. I'm not a good marketer.
Am I allowed to post a link to it if I find it? Because I know we talked about
post a link to it. I'm happy if people post a link to it. I'll get my $1 in royalties a quarter or whatever I get from the book nowadays.
I mean, if I could find it, I really would. But it's there's the
just
problem
Google
with
my
that
name.
singer.
It'll show up. Just Google my name and Amazon, and you'll get it.
The problem is that Amazon thinks that I just spelled your name wrong because of that that damn singer.
Oh dear. Hold on. Let me get a link to it here.
Okay. This is okay. I mean, yeah.
Okay. The book title, by the way, is Tempo 150-25, gusting 35 knots 100, heavy snow, freezing fog, overcast 000, snow flow.
It is free
so that's why
with your Kindle Unlimited.
Sorry, that's the name?
Yeah, it's yeah.
Well, Sean, I think we need to have a conversation about headlines.
I know, but this is not meant to be a commercial thing. It's rated 4.5 stars, so hey.
I'm sure it's great, but
and it's free with your Kindle Unlimited, or you can buy it now for $2.99. Link on Amazon right here.
Thank you guys so much. Thank you again, Sean. This has been too fun. It's all downhill from here. So thank you for ruining.
Thank you very much. It's been a very entertaining hour, and as I said, I love telling stories. You could keep me going on stories till tomorrow morning. So we've just scratched the surface. Now you got me warmed up.
Well, we're looking forward to scratching it more. I don't know if that's so.
That's awkward. On that note.
On that note.
Thank you guys. Thanks for joining. Hit the bell to be reminded of our Sunday brunch, which will probably not be this fabulous, but will still happen. Take our survey on travel and the coronavirus and your thoughts on 1 Mile at a Time if you haven't had a chance yet. And thank you guys so much.
Thank you, Sean.